All right, Len. Len, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Let's see. I am part of the global enablement team and a white hat hacker for CyberArk software. I've been currently in my role here at CyberArk for going on 8 years, and I've been in the IT field for going on 28 years. My first attack was actually, or if you want to call it a hack, was actually on a Commodore 64. So I've been around for a really long time, and I think one of the reasons it makes me as good as I am is the fact that I know where all the bodies are buried, and I remember computers before GUIs.
So what did you do to the Commodore 64? What was the attack?
It wasn't so much an attack as it was. This is where I learned about the concepts of code. You seem to be a spry gentleman such as myself that may have been around for a little while.
Yep.
Back in the day, if you remember, there wasn't like the internet or anything, so they had periodicals and magazines that you could buy, and there was one for the Commodore, and there was the ability to code a version of Frogger.
Okay.
And during my first attempt at writing a program, I screwed up something and my frog wouldn't die. He could get run over, and it was like, wait a minute, so the stuff that's happening in the back has the direct connection to what's happening in the front. So that was kind of where the switch got flipped for me. My father was one of those guys that, always had to have the latest technology. So I was very blessed in the fact that I had a Commodore 64, I had an Amiga 128, I had a TRS-80, a 386, a 486 DX2 with the Mathcro processor so you could handle that floating decimal point. So yeah, I've been around for a really, really long time.
Great.
So tell me a little bit about your position at CyberArk and just an elevator pitch on who CyberArk is.
Sure. Like I said, I'm part of the global enablement team, and I'm a white hat. So my role at CyberArk, I do a lot of public speaking. I'm an international security speaker. I've spoken in 28 different countries at major conferences all over the world. CyberArk, we are the privileged access management leader. We were the ones that actually invented this space. So our role within the IT world is to basically take over and help you control your privileged access, deliver that access back down to your users in a true least privilege fashion, never allowing those passwords to actually reach the endpoint, proctoring those connections to high-valued targets with full DVR-style recordings, including Windows event correlation. We also have our own analytics, we have our own endpoint protection, and we recently are getting into the identity space with our latest acquisition of Adaptive Identity.
So you've been in a lot of countries. Besides Madison, Wisconsin, where we're here today, what's the most interesting place that you've done a speech at?
The most...
Brookfield.
Interesting. I would have to actually give that a tie. Dubai. I once did a speech at the Ritz-Carlton in Dubai, and I have to say it was one of the few places where I was actually afraid to touch anything because I know I couldn't afford to replace any of it. But honestly, I love Amsterdam. I've done a lot of stuff in the Nordic regions in Europe, Amsterdam, Sweden, Norway. They are just some of the most amazing people to try and present to. They are very receptive to the ideas of technology. They want to learn and they want to get better. So those would be my two favorites.
So you've said white hat hacker a few times. So can we elaborate a little bit on that?
Well, sure. Excuse me. I've spent the majority of my life actually as a black hat. I was never the type of black hat that was vindictive. I've just always been very fascinated by the puzzle, and I'm one of those guys where my stuff is safe. You can't break in. Let's test that theory. I think the worst thing in terms of like an offensive thing that I've ever done was honestly back when I was in high school 150 years ago. And I got busted breaking into the network and stealing tests and changing grades. So even when I was technically a black hat, it was never about, trying to steal your information or your data. I was the guy that would break in and leave a note on your desktop that says, you need to change your default router password, man. So me, it was always just the challenge. And it's been that way my whole life.
Yeah. So it's funny how a company like CyberArk, which actually remember putting it in at a very highly regulated industry like 15 years ago.
Yep.
Way early on, I thought, oh, this company won't last forever. This is a piece of a big company, of a big authentication system, and it showed how much I know. But it was very interesting. And now you did touch on a topic though that we want to move into here is that with all the ransomware going on in the industry,
Oh my God.
it's kind of like a second life into your organization
it
as far as
really
a growth
is.
opportunity. And maybe we can talk a little bit about the cyber insurance ramifications
God.
and what actually is going on with controls and actually the insurance industry actually getting into controls, which is
Yeah.
that's a big step.
It's a huge step. I mean, I was looking at some figures before I came in here. I mean, last year alone, over 480 million was paid out in ransomware insurance. And the fact that, we now are dealing where insurance companies, if you look back, 5-7 years ago, not even that far, let's just say pre-COVID, if you were to try and buy cyber insurance, it was basically one sheet of paper with a bunch of check boxes. Do you have antivirus? Do you have anti-malware? Do you have a firewall?
Yep.
And now we're in a position where after all of these insurance companies have been hit over the course of the pandemic, I mean, the ransomware attacks over the last year and a half with everybody being locked down it's every week we're hearing something new. And we're now seeing where a lot of insurance companies are either dropping out of the cyber insurance market completely, or, they're being so much more stringent in their requirements. You're looking at like an 8 to 10 page dossier on your entire security stack. And, the penalties for not complying, they're talking about, if you're non-compliant, some insurance are talking about raising your rates up to 300%. And a lot of these companies are getting sometimes only up to 60 days notice to come into compliance. And, if you're an enterprise organization, or even worse, if you're a small organization that doesn't have those kinds of capabilities, how are you going to be able to deal with getting some type of multi-factor? Because that's the insurance company's new big buzzword is they finally learned about MFA.
Right.
Those of us in the security industry, we've known about it forever. But, a lot of these insurance companies are requiring multi-factor in front of every single privileged privileged account. So how do you do that? Especially in an expedited time fashion. They want single-use passwords. So as soon as your session is over, they want that password rotated so the hash becomes invalidated. This is a major change to the cyber insurance field, and it's a major change to operations for any company that's looking for this type of insurance.
Do you have an impact on third-party risk? That's a big supply chain risk and all that.
Oh,
We
yeah.
should probably talk about that. That's a huge piece of the puzzle here.
Oh, yeah. I mean, third party and supply chains, I mean, I love the fact that this is actually a topic that people are talking about now. I mean, prior to SolarWinds, and some of the pipeline attacks, and, supply chain attacks are now in the forefront. But the truth is they've always been there.
Right. It was very similar to the insurance, like you said.
Yeah.
Your vendor management program would be check this box, check that box. Nothing actually validating anything, just check boxes.
MSPs are now being, called out on the carpet going, all right, you're my service provider. What are your, preventative measures? What type of, security protocols do you have in place to keep me as your client safe? And when, just a quick step back to the SolarWinds attack, I mean, this was the federal government. So I mean, if the federal government's not, locking down their access, and they're using these MSPs, what hope does, a mom and pop shop that has, a part-time IT department and rely on, professional services to try and maintain their organization? It's almost impossible.
Yeah, now the other, we just had our roundtable and they were discussing some of the challenges here. All the contracts you already have in place with third parties don't address a lot of this. So I think what you're going to see as a fallout from all the ransomware with the insurance companies is people going to have to rewrite all of their contracts with the people downstream and upstream to now have more teeth in them, and actually who's liable for what, and it's
And to that point, how do you restructure those contracts in the middle of in between a negotiation?
Exactly.
You know, does the fact that, you know, we have these new regulations coming down, is that going to be enough to push the ability to renegotiate? Or are you going to wind up with some hard-nosed MSPs who are going to be like, nope, this is what we agreed on, so therefore you're going to have, you know, as the end customer, you're going to have to look into doing your own stuff on-prem outside of what we're managing. You know, this is going to be just an absolute nightmare for at least until we can kind of figure out the flow and how to make this happen.
And on CyberArk, you mentioned is getting into the identity and access management. So can you give us a vision of what you think that will look like in a few years between the privileged account and the bigger picture?
We see it as almost like a unifying platform. Everything comes back to privilege, you know, and CyberArk, to speak from a CyberArk perspective, you know, everything starts with our digital vault, where we take all the credentials, hashes, APIs, shared secrets. We store those with individual encryptions. You know, one of the mandates that came out was the idea of putting MFA in front of every privileged account. That's something, you know, and this isn't meant to be like a pitch, but you served me a softball, so I'm going to take it. I'm going to take it. You know, with CyberArk, we do have those abilities built in. You know, we have one-time use, you know, password rotation policies. The way that we distribute our privilege back to the end users is not on like a group basis, so it becomes very, very granular. You know, the idea that, you know, we can lock down the credentials. Then when we look at the endpoint solution that we have, taking care of local administration, UAC control, application whitelist, blacklisting, and gray listing, just-in-time access. And then on top of that, we throw in our analytics, which does behavioral and heuristical analytics. We have the suite, and if there's some type of functionality that we don't have, you know, we have an amazing partnership through our C-Cubed Alliance. I mean, we've got a bunch of our C-Cubed Alliance partners right out here at the conference out here this afternoon. You know, CrowdStrike, Checkpoint. You know, security is not a single user sport. You know, the idea of a single silver bullet doesn't exist. You know, personally, I love to preach the concept of defense in depth. There is no one company, not even my own, we can't do it all and do it best. So what we've done is partnered with the best in breed of all of the different types of access that might be out there. And we've built our, you know, actual verified integrations with companies that are the best in that area to try and bring a true unified solution. You know, it's not, security is a team sport. It really is.
Is there a point in the future with your vault and your, like you mentioned, your remote desktop capability that could actually become like third-party access in the companies and things like, is that?
In terms of like third-party accessing?
Third-party, like when in order to
we have it.
do risk management at a big time scale.
We already have it. It's called remote access. And what it does is it allows third-party vendors, contractors, support staff, professional services that may not be within the organization to use biometrics to validate their individual identity, access the CyberArk stack via the web, and then proctor those connections to those high-value endpoints with privileged accounts. So and it still gives you the same DVR-style recording and the accountability and the audit trail. So we actually have that product in place already.
And it seems to solve a lot of problems. I wasn't sure on the scale of how many, you know, how much you could actually put through there and scale it.
We can handle it. Okay. You know, and I'm trying to think of how to say this. There's some amazing white papers in terms of scalability, concurrent users, all that stuff up on our website. But the name of the product is the CyberArk Remote Access.
Because they talk about browser isolation technology.
Oh yeah,
you're
HTML5.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Browser isolation. It's exactly what we're doing.
So it's kind of like almost reinventing the remote desktop.
And we're doing it, you know, without the need of forcing different TLS rules, and we're doing it in such a way that we're using physical biometrics to validate the origin of the request. And even with that, once you get into our product, you're still only going to be limited to what accounts that you've been provisioned to. You're never going to know what the password is, and we're going to make that connection for you. So that way, that credential never makes it down to a tier 2 asset. So if you're compromised with malware or spyware, it can't be scraped off of that device.
And from a forensics perspective, you've recorded the whole session.
From
You know
start
exactly
to finish.
what happened.
Yeah,
So it's,
from a DFIR perspective, it makes your purple team's lives a lot easier. I mean, one thing I've heard this. I'm still trying to nail it down to say that it's gospel, But one of the things that we were told that during the SolarWinds breach, one of the lines of codes in the payload was, "Does this system have CyberArk? If so, move on." Because they knew that they weren't going to be able to get past some of our protocols. And, coming from a security company, I think that's about as high a recommendation as you can get when the bad guys go, "You know what, it ain't even worth trying on this one."
great. That is really cool. Like I said, when I first was introduced, it's been around for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
And it was originally it was more of a play of just efficiency too. I mean, back in the old days, you think about every privileged account, you have operating systems, you have databases, you have machines, you have
Firewalls.
They're all over the place, and every department kind of siloed it for a long time. No one really looked at how big the problem was because everybody took care of passwords locally.
Yep.
So phase one was just kind of, let's get control on this and just
We call that the sprint. Give me your highest, most valuable assets. Give me your domain and your enterprise admins, your schema admins. Start with those 3. Then let's move into local administrators, database administrators. Anybody that's going to try and undertake any type of privileged access management program, if you're not careful, it will be like trying to drink directly from a fire hose. So you have to do it in a phased approach or it becomes chaos.
well, people used to have to come in on the weekends to change privileged accounts because that's the only time they can take the system
Oh,
down.
I remember those
So
days.
people would have to make weekends.
Oh, yeah.
cover, just changing privileged
don't
accounts.
forget we had to pull one of the drives just in case.
Right, yep.
God forbid something happened. You had to be able to break that mirror so you could slam that drive back in and be back up for operational efficiency by
And the
Monday.
other thing that I think is interesting is you start talking about this whole landscape is actually even being able to change the passwords in applications as they run.
Yep.
We talked
Very
about one of
much.
the problems being hard-coded passwords and things in applications.
That's one of our
and rotations
specialties.
Of it, and you get it documented. So to me, I've always been kind of a fan, but I called this one way wrong. I just thought it would become part of an identity and access managed system. How hard can privileged accounts be?
Well, you were on the cutting edge.
all I can say is we were happy to disappoint.
Right, yeah. So it's great. I'll be really curious to see how this journey to the identity and access management on a bigger scale. how that
Well,
goes.
one of the things that's really helping us as a company is the fact that we're moving more to a cloud-based option as well. Up until within the last couple of years, everything has been an on-prem kind of an installation. Well, now with Privileged Cloud or P-Cloud, we have the ability to run. You can run your CyberArk stack up in AWS, which opens up the cloud infrastructure and all of the benefits therein. So, I've been here it'll be 9 years next July, and I was actually working for one of their customers when I had my first introduction to CyberArk. So I've been on the customer side, and I've now been with the organization, like I said, for going on 9 years. So it's been a really interesting journey going from the guy who's like, what do you mean you're going to take my administrative rights away? To now sitting on this side of the table going, really, you don't want those
that.
things all the time. Because
Protects you as much as-
it really does. And that's the part that people don't understand about privileged access management is it protects you as the end user, because if you've got somebody like me or, an adversarial, person come in and I compromise your account, it looks like you did all the bad stuff, not me.
Exactly,
So
right.
if you don't have access to if you're not running with those privileges all the time, it's kind of hard for me to scrape them and use them without your knowledge, And to that point, back to our original conversation around the cyber insurance, the 3 tenets of security, and I don't care if it's CyberArk, Checkpoint, or anybody, multi-tenant architecture, credential boundaries, and multi-factor authentication. These are, in my opinion, are the 3 staples of any type of secure program from the ground up. Privileged access management, identity, all of that are just layers on top.
Do you have, can you talk specifically about on the insurance side, what you're addressing for them and how you fit into their picture?
Absolutely. From the compliance standpoint, one of the big things is they want multi-factor passwords or MFA in front of every privileged account. Well, CyberArk, we set it up as a part of our best practice. You need to multi-factor into our solution. Well, that right there takes care of getting that multi-factor requirement taken care of. Through our central password manager, we can actually set up single-use passwords. So every time you use one of these passwords for a session, the minute you're done, our password manager will go out, will rotate those passwords for you, invalidate the previous hashes. There's another point on the compliance chain. You know, they want the auditing perspectives. Every connection is ran through our privileged session manager, full DVR style recordings with Windows event correlation to the DVR. So CyberArk, just through proper configuration and implementation of our solution, we can handle almost all of the actual requirements that would be needed in order to become compliant.
Is there an integration with some of the identity and access management systems that are out there today?
Oh, yeah.
And the privileged accounts as well as the single sign-on type?
Oh yeah, we have integrations with over, I think it was some like, good Lord, I think our C-Cubed Alliance partner right now is somewhere in the realms of about 800 different companies. I know Duo's in there, Okta's in there.
Okay.
So yeah, just because we have our own identity solution doesn't mean that we would expect someone to necessarily drop their existing, vendors. We as long as it complies to the standard ANSI standards and things, it'll work. And one of the great things about our product is we are not platform agnostic. As long as we can talk to it, we can work with it, and we require pretty much no agents for the most part in terms of password rotation and control. The only time agents come into play for us would be if we were dealing with our endpoint management products, and I think we do have an agent with our identity product as well, but we deal with all native protocols. So if we're dealing with a Linux box, we're going to be communicating over SSH. If we're dealing with a Windows box, we're going to be talking over RPC. So it doesn't require anything more than what you already have.
Great. That's some good
Len,
good information.
I appreciate you flying across the country to talk to us. It's been an
I appreciate
absolute
the opportunity,
pleasure.
guys.
Thanks.
I thank you guys here. I really appreciate the chance to talk to y'all. I had a great time, and hopefully I'll see you guys again next year.
Len, really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Yeah, that's good stuff.